I recently discussed the fact that Nvidia isn't exactly being all that honest when it comes to statements like the RTX 5070 equals the 4090's performance at just $550. At least, not exactly. Like I said in that, what they're referring to is specifically DLSS 4 multi-frame generation, which is basically 3 generated frames in between 2 rendered frames. Meaning, for every 4 frames, you have 3 of those that are generated. And obviously that comes with issues, not to mention the fact that it wouldn't be true for every game, only games that offer DLSS 4. Just quite a few caveats to this slide right here. Well, today I'm actually going to discuss what the real performance of these GPUs are. For one, Nvidia sort of shares this in some of their slides, but also I have heard some things myself. But before I get to that, I got a chance to check out Ugreen's booth on the show floor. They helped to sponsor my trip here, and they have some really cool new stuff that's coming out very soon, like their new NAS with AI. It's called the Ugreen NAS Sync IDX series, and it actually comes equipped with an Intel Core Ultra 5 processor with up to 34 TOPS performance, meaning this bad boy can literally run a built-in large language model on it, which means it can do things like generate smart meaning summarization and manage your files by assigning smart tags. It can also make suggestions on content to look at based on your needs and files stored on the NAS. It's basically your own private cloud server with an AI assistant there to help you anytime you need. Plus, they're showing off their awesome new 500-watt charger that can charge up to 6 devices at once, as well as their upcoming Thunderbolt 5 docking station for 120 gigabit per second goodness. Basically, Ugreen has some really awesome tech coming, and when you use my link in the description below, you'll get up to $225 off their NAS. So check that out today, and thanks to Ugreen for sponsoring this video. Okay, before I get to the real performance, I'm going to quickly go over the performance numbers that Nvidia shows with DLSS 4, then I'm going to go over the specs, then we'll go over some of that performance. So first, as you can see here, with DLSS 4, you do get wild frame rate jumps. So this is the RTX 4090, specifically with DLSS 3.5. For ray tracing on, you can see we're looking at around 106 FPS with Cyberpunk 2077, but then with the 5090, looks like, wow, we're talking twice the performance, over twice the performance, like 130% faster, but that is because it's using this DLSS 4, which means that it's more or less making more of those fake frames. Now, I don't fully want to say that because I do want to see what this technology looks like before we really push it too hard. One of my major concerns is just whether these frames are going to break down as it generates more, because it's having to generate the data off of 2 frames back or 3 frames back. So does this break down over time? That's one of the questions I have. Plus, I do want to know about latency. Either way, as you can see, we're talking massive performance, which is why they're able to make those claims. But when we actually look at the specs, which Nvidia has officially published, well, for one, you'll notice that a lot of these are pretty much identical to the ones that were leaked. They were honestly spot on for a really long time, at least for the most part. Either way, as you can see here with the memory bus width, it is in fact 512-bit. Completely wild. Then it comes with a whopping 21,760 cores, which is a very nice boost over the 16,384 cores, but obviously we knew that the 5090 itself was set to be a pretty decent boost in performance. It also comes with 32 gigabytes of GDDR7, just like we thought. Now, one thing I will state is that you'll actually notice that the boost clock is lower. Actually, not just the boost clock, sorry, the boost and base clocks are lower than the RTX 4090. Though, of course, it comes with significantly more cores and it's a different architecture, so you can't perfectly extrapolate what kind of performance we can expect, but you can at least get a little bit of an idea. Don't get me wrong, we are actually going to look specifically at performance. But then when we move over to the RTX 5080, you'll notice that we're looking at just 10,752 cores. Compare that to the RTX 4080 with 9,728. And let me check my notes here really quickly. Yeah, we're talking 10.5% increase. Not only that, but, well, unlike the 5090, you can notice that the clocks went up at least slightly, though it's really not anything huge. We're talking like 100 megahertz or so here and there. Then when we move over to the 5070, that one actually gets even worse. Well, first we'll start with the 5070 Ti, which this one has a higher percentage cores than the other two when compared to the regular 4070 Ti. So we're talking 8,960 cores versus 7,680, and that is a difference of 16.6%. But then when we move down to the regular 5070, which is probably one of the big reasons that they were really trying to hype this up, is because when you really look at what is likely the rasterization performance, it's not all that impressive. As you can see, we're looking at 6,144 cores versus 5,888. We are talking less than a 5% increase. And it really isn't all that better when it comes to clocks. We're talking 1.92 and 2.48 to 2.16 and 2.51. So a little bit of a boost there, but definitely not anything huge. Now, moving back to the RTX 5090, like I said, we're now going to be going to actual performance here. And as I move up, you can see that they do share some graphs, and a lot of these are over twice the performance. But luckily, for one, you can see A Plague Tale Requiem only supports DLSS 3, and then you have one that doesn't have DLSS at all. And you can see that those are the ones where there really isn't a huge performance jump. With that said, it is at least decent here. It's hard to know the exact figure because they just have 1x and then 2x, so it's around looking like maybe 30, maybe 35% faster in this game than Far Cry 6. We're looking at closer to maybe 15 to 20% faster. So certainly not anywhere near those, 2.3 times over 2x performance boost. Then when we move over to the RTX 5080, we see the same thing, except it's actually a little worse. You see A Plague Tale Requiem here, it's fairly fast, but then it moves down a bit. So here it looks more like around 20% faster than the RTX 5070 series. Or this is specifically first the 5070 Ti. You can see that it does look like that performance goes up slightly yet again, but don't forget that the 5070 Ti is the one that has the most amount of new cores, like percentage-wise. It received the most new amount of cores versus last gen. But then when we move to the 5070, I will say it's around the same X improvement it does look like, but once again, well, I will say that the 2x, these games over here actually lowered a bit, but regardless, we're still looking at around maybe 15, 20, maybe 25%, somewhere around there. And that should be about what we can actually expect in rasterization, especially if you're someone who doesn't want to turn on DLSS 4, or for those who are playing a game that doesn't support it. And that, like I said, is one of the big reasons why I would argue it's not really cool to say, ooh, you're getting 4090s performance, because it very much is a massive caveat there. I mean, technically it is capable of it, but that isn't just native regular performance. And this sort of brings me to some discussions that I've had with different people, what other people are hearing at CES, and basically I'm getting anywhere from around 10 to 30% performance increase, which would make the RTX 5000 series certainly a decent boost in performance, especially when we're talking the RTX 5090, but it certainly isn't this 2x, 2.5x, things like that. With that said, I certainly am open to trying DLSS 4, really getting my hands on it to see what kind of breakdown happens in image quality, to see what it feels like, all of that. But when you're looking at performance without being forced to turn that on, these seem to be the numbers that we're actually given. Of course, we are going to have to test these in quite a few games, and definitely stay tuned for that.